How do you, in a situation like that, decide the priorities ought to be coming out of Washington, out of the capital city, rather than at the local level? I mean, who knows best? Folks in Washington who have
I can
the whole
answer that.
picture?
Is that a multiple choice?
or folks at the local level?
No. Well, there's no doubt at the local level. I mean, in some point, responding, Judy, to the question about the Recovery Act, because of the speed we had to move, we used what has been the traditional formulas. The problems between cities and their state governments in the sense of resource distribution, every mayor will tell you examples of things that are major projects have to be done. States have their priorities and they don't match up. But because we had to move quickly and respond to the recession with full force, we had to use what has basically been the traditional formula. There are many needs that clearly, when you have just on infrastructure alone, forget the schools part or the other part, on infrastructure alone, the country faces a $1.3 trillion deficit in needs, and no one Recovery Act was going to meet all that or address all that. There are many needs just for infrastructure building in a sense of maintenance and upgrade, as well as investments in the future, as we've done here in high speed, as 4 or 5 places around the country have been picked as the corridors for high-speed rail. So the local level knows best where it needs to spend its priorities, where it needs to spend these precious dollars, whether that's on new projects, maintenance, or upgrading. The formula was what it was to move with speed, which is what was needed at the time for the economy. The critical need, and one of the things the President's now looking at, and we've started, which is an infrastructure bank which looks down the road and says, okay, which of these projects are of national import? And you can't do it just with tax revenue. So you need private sector in. That infrastructure bank will basically leverage public dollars and public commitment, bring in private dollars to do national projects that a locality on its own cannot do. So there was an immediate need that was met by the Recovery Act, thinking long term to our infrastructure needs. That was what we were doing and what we're going to do with the infrastructure bank.
Rom, how does it look in Washington, where
It also sounds better in French, Washington. Obviously you've seen the partisanship over the last year, but I don't think partisanship is in the city or the country actually is as divided as Washington, D.C. That's number one. I don't think the country is. Number two, while you've seen the division,
but a lot of people are angry.
That's different than partisanship. Okay. That's different there. As I said, as Greg noted, there's a reason people are angry after seeing median household income decline over the last 10 years and a system in which the leadership across both private and public sector, from Wall Street to Washington, failed them. There's a justification to that anger. But my main point, Judy, is while there was anger and frustration, or partisanship rather, on health care or the Recovery Act, out in the country, there's a great deal of coming together on Race to the Top on education. Because it involved people, states mainly, and localities, working together, management, teacher unions, local parents, coming together with solutions to compete for resources that were locally based. So while you can point to healthcare or you can point to the Recovery Act, and it didn't need to be that way, nonetheless, you can also point to Race to the Top in education, an idea that came from Arne Duncan and the President from Chicago, a model here of how to reward success rather than doing it on a formula basis. And people all across, it's usually based on divisions, said what is common here about trying to compete for these resources? How do we put all of us collectively some skin in the game, not try to protect something, but how to get something? And because of that, there was actually a lot of Republican governors, a lot of people that traditionally don't support and have a division on the issue of education, cross party lines, cross institutional divisions that came together to compete. So while there is one picture of Washington, I would say there's another picture. And I again reinforce, while there is a division and there is a lot of anger, I don't think it's as bad, the division is not as bad in America as it is in Washington. The frustration is about what's happening economically, and we're going through a big period of transition. And you have to accept that, understand it, and then try to channel it to a more positive place.
And the case is a lot of the media focus is on Washington.
That's a whole nother panel, Judy.
That's another panel.